I'll start with a few thoughts and maybe we can open that up for discussion. The first point I wanted to make is, you mentioned in your introduction the climate change issue, the climate crisis. The reality is that we have two crises that are mutually, I would say, reinforcing each other. They're two sides of the same coin. There may be separate conventions on these issues, there may be separate political processes, but I think they're equally important, equally urgent, and we need to see how we can actually bring together the discussion on these two issues. On the urgency of the biodiversity loss, the data is absolutely staggering. IPBES has done a very important report on this. In 2020, we published our Living Planet report. Just one statistic I will share with you, and that report refers to a 68% drop in wildlife populations in the last 50 years. Now, do we care? Is the question. Well, we should. Following on from what we just heard, I think it's important to recognize that beyond the ethical side of this, beyond the intrinsic value that nature and biodiversity has, we actually see that healthy nature is directly linked to our own health. And the information that we just heard, something like 800,000 viruses that could potentially infect man, and we're only witnessing one right now in the COVID-19 case. So it is in our best interest to understand that link. Just to follow on from that argument, I think if we look at the business side, the economy side, the World Economic Forum published a report, I think last year, analyzing that over half of global GDP is actually dependent on nature. It underpins our global food security, our nutrition. It provides us with critical services, but it's actually disappearing before our very eyes. Do we care? Do people care? Does society care? Well, if you had asked me that maybe 20 years ago, I would have responded, no, not really, not as much as they should. But I think the reality is throughout the world and in Greece as well, things are changing there. There's a lot more interest, a lot more concern, a lot more worry about this issue. And you will know, of course, Alistair, that WWF commissioned research that was done by the Economist Intelligence Unit a while back, working in, I think, 54 different countries. The research covered about 80% of the global population. And the results there were actually quite interesting. There was a substantial increase in awareness and engagement, especially in Asia. Substantial changes in consumer behavior, and also a growing public demand for concrete action. So the science is actually very clear. The public is finally beginning to take notice and look for action. I think the other question, of course, is how do the politicians feel about this? Where does biodiversity sit on the political or on the corporate agenda? And here I would say that we have a mix. On the one hand, we're seeing this featuring more in discussions, featuring more on the political agenda, but there's still a big distance between the rhetoric, the pledges, the commitments, and action on the ground. And I think action really at this stage in time is the key word. So what do we need moving forward? How can we address this severe biodiversity loss crisis? Well, again, I think this is as for climate, this is a critical year. And it's time, as climate has its own time-bound global goal, we think it's also very important that nature has the same thing. And for us, that goal cannot go to 2050. That would be too far down the line. We need a goal, an ambitious goal for 2030. And in our view, and in the view of many scientists and organizations around the world, what we need to work towards is securing what is called a nature-positive world by 2030. That means there would be more nature in the world than there is today. It's ambitious. It requires us to protect more nature than present. It requires us to transform the way we consume and produce, and really to redirect, I think, financial flows towards nature-positive economic transition. Can that be done? Well, it has to be done. And I think, as I said, the timing is critical. We know that this is the year of the CBD COP. Because of the pandemic, that COP has actually been broken into 2 sessions. One session, of course, in October, where we hope to be having the Kunming Declaration coming out, and one session in April or May of 2022. And that's where that agreement needs to be signed off. I'll finish off with one final point regarding Greece. Some of you might not know, but Greece is actually a true biodiversity hotspot. We have 36,000 species of animal and plants. Roughly 1/4 of all animals and plants found in Europe are found in Greece. 2% of global biodiversity resides in this country. And we actually have a number of endemic species, that is, species that are only found in this country. So we're a fortunate country, but that also comes with a lot of responsibility. And I think the analogy that I drew earlier on about this difference between commitment, pledge, and action is also applicable in the case of Greece. We have, I think, something like 446 Natura 2000 areas, protected areas. Most of those areas, unfortunately, are still on paper. We have important commitments. Just recently in the IUCN World Conservation Congress, the Prime Minister committed to Greece becoming a champion for nature conservation, but at the same time, he also, to his credit, admitted that that isn't the case right now, and we actually have a ruling from the EU Court of Justice pending for Greece for problematic implementation of the Habitats Directive. So just in closing, I would say that we are at a critical tipping point at this stage in time. Biodiversity in nature is important not only for its intrinsic value, but for our own well-being. And it's in our best interest, both in this country and at a global and a European level, to take action here and now.